everyone, and welcome to another episode of All My Best Friends Are Digital, a podcast about video games and the stories they tell. I am one of your hosts, Caitlin Bailey, and I have with me my co-host, Mark Bigney. Mark, what is up?
I never know how to respond to that question because it's implying a level of vernacular that is at odds with my general level of popularity. Stuff, I guess? Video games. Video games are what's up, Caitlin.
Yes, that is true. Video games are what's up, and as usual, we're going to be talking about what we are currently playing, followed by WarioWare Twisted in our Gaming Opinions on Old School Funware segment, what we call GOOF. And then we're going to jump into our feature game, Citizen Sleeper. Finally, we will end with some shameless hyping of upcoming titles in our Shout segment. So Mark, what have you been playing lately?
I've been playing Deadzone Rogue, and I think that this is a triumph of marketing because I was bombarded with advertising for Deadzone Rogue. Not entirely surprising, given that it is a roguelite. It was in early access for a long time, and consequently, given that early access has basically let us concede the reality that it is essentially a marketing stage, not an actual process of game development, or at least it is as much a marketing stage as it is an actual process of game development. Deadzone Rogue managed to find a way to find its way into my mentions, and so I decided to give it a try somewhat uncharacteristically because it is a first-person shooter roguelite, and when it comes to first-person shooters, my experience with them is very much hit or miss. That is not what you would call top-class wordplay, but it is something that I will accept for the moment. Now, when it comes to roguelites, I'm going to sound like I'm beating on the same drum because I very much am. I care very much about the upgrades and the pacing. The upgrades had best feel like fun toys. Cool things had best happen. The best-in-class examples of this I would offer are Risk of Rain and Hades, where your upgrade may have the functional equivalent of basically just a 10% damage buff, but it's going to be manifest as some kind of bolt of lightning that erupts from your target and then maybe chains to a couple of other things, and is tied to weird elements of lore and or other bits of world building. And on that scale, Deadzone Rogue is mostly disappointing because you're just awash in plus 3% bonus to critical chance, plus 20% damage buff. I mean, they're useful, but many of them don't have any visual flourish at all, and very few of them feel like fun toys. It is mostly just number go up. Mm-hmm. And given that number go up at roughly the same pace for both your upgrades and for the targets at which you'll be shooting, it doesn't really help me feel like I'm progressing in any sort of cool kind of way. It just keeps things on an even level, which is it's not ideal. There are some exceptions. A standout is the ability to unlock combat drones, and combat drones are fun because they're little buddies that fly around with you, and they attract enemy fire, and so between a little combat drone that might be the target of an enemy attack and a plus 5% damage resistance, I'll take the former any day of the week, because it's obviously more useful and more fun. And then there's the pacing, which is also a mixed bag. So it has a nominal mission structure, but your first mission is complete a run. And so until you complete that, you're going to be banging your head against the wall in the same mission structure against the same enemies for quite some time. Once you do that, though, then things do start to open up in terms of variety. You get shorter missions that don't involve 30 combat chambers, which obviously takes a fair amount of time to get through. Mm-hmm. And I'd complain more about this, but to my shock, I discovered that 84% of Deadzone Rogue players on Steam had finished the first mission. And so consequently, I have to assume that, given that only a small minority don't do this, that it is less of a burden or barrier than I might think. Because once you complete the first mission, you open up new zones, new enemies, and shorter missions and all these other things, and so the pacing gets a lot better then. But the length of a run is a bit of a slog. It's also the case that I have the same problem I have in a lot of modern-style combat games, which is that the impetus to change up your weapon or your playstyle is minimal. Mm-hmm. You know, give me a fully automatic, mid-range carbine, SMG, or assault rifle or whatever, and I'm happy. Now, there are ways to get around this. In games like Borderlands, for example, you don't really upgrade your weapons, and so you're constantly on the lookout for a new gun, and so if a weapon spawns that is at your current power level, and it's the only option you've got, you will be forced to use a sniper rifle when that's not your style, or a shotgun when that's not your style. And I much prefer that to the way the Deadzone does it, which is, that weapon that you picked up at the end of the first level, you can just keep upgrading that up until the very end of your run. And I have a strong dispreference for that, frankly. It just doesn't challenge me. It just doesn't force me to vary up the playstyle. And that also helps with the sense of kind of repetitive pacing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all of this, I think, is forgivable because of, as I say, once you beat the first run, the variety really takes a shot in the arm. The pacing definitely improves. And the fundamental core gunplay is very satisfying. Anybody who's played Destiny for half as long as I have will tell you that making gunplay feel good is a very essential element of making your shooters successful, and it's one of the reasons why I bounce off so many first-person shooters. They're just not as smooth feeling or as satisfying to just run around, aim, shoot things, etc., than they are in Destiny, and Deadzone Rogue does a very, very good job of making the gunplay feel good. It doesn't feel as spectacular or as dynamic as the trailers make it out to be, such as the nature of trailers, again, marketing techniques. But it does do one really interesting thing that I think is worth flagging, especially in the context of the overall structure and gameplay. When you enter a new zone, you enter in stealth mode, and none of the enemies will see you. They're just running around in their standard patrol modes. And so you can tour the level and decide where you're going to start and maybe make your final stand, or maybe even just stay the entire time, or decide a path through which you're going to be running and gunning. And I was initially concerned that this was going to be the kind of video game stealth, whereby if you get too close, the robots will ping you, or if you accidentally brush up against somebody, then... No. This stealth is super robust. And it really is just an invitation to just take a look at the level before the round starts. Now, this doesn't help with my pacing concerns.
Sure.
But it does make me feel like I have a fair degree of control, which is good, because when runs go sideways, it is typically by virtue of the fact that you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you can go from unstoppable killing machine to dead in a very, very, very quick period. This leads to my final criticism of Deadzone Rogue, which is there's still a fair amount of jank in the product, technically. When the game is running, it looks great, it's not particularly system intensive, everything's all right. Every once in a while, though, you kind of get hung up on terrain features, not in a buggy way, but just because they wanted to put assets in there, and suddenly that melee robot that you've been kiting the entire time catches up with you, hits you twice, and you're dead, because you couldn't quite figure out what direction you needed to go to disentangle yourself from this terrain feature that was there mostly for cosmetics. On top of that, this is the strangest thing. I've never had this experience before in a PC game, certainly not in the past 10 to 20 years. But recently, when I loaded it up, it told me that the newest version of my graphics driver led to performance degradation, and I should really roll back to an earlier version, and it's specified which one. And it offered me a URL about where to go get it. I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And so I went, and I've got an NVIDIA card. It's not exactly super obscure. It's older, but it is what it is. And so I get the older driver, and this older driver caused Deadzone Rogue to crash reliably. So the driver that it told me to go get caused the loading screen to hang and prevent me from being able to start a level, and so I had to Alt F4 out of it. And then I just reinstalled the newer driver back to where I was before, and now the game runs fine. It's so strange. I don't know what they're talking about. Maybe if the game hadn't crashed, I would get 4 more FPS in Deadzone Rogue or something. I don't know what they're talking about. It was so strange. I don't know if you've ever experienced anything like that, Caitlin.
No, I constantly am hounded to upgrade my graphics drivers because I am always behind the curve there. But I've never been told to roll back to an older version, especially only to have that version crash the game.
It was so specific. It said, you are running version X, which was accurate. We suggest you go download version Y. And I did. And I was rewarded for my efforts with an unplayable game. Anyway.
Yay! What is the goal in Deadzone Rogue? So you can explore the level, figure out where to... Do you just need to wipe out all the enemies on the stage?
Yes.
Or... Okay.
It is not complicated. It is not what you would call fancy. It's also a little bit more static than I'd like. You know, there's not a whole lot of jumping. There's not a whole lot of verticality in the combat.
Okay.
Very few enemies engage in anything resembling flight or anything like that. And you as a character certainly don't. And so consequently, I mean, it is a testament to how good the gunplay is that I am willing to do this nearly endless series of combat encounters where it's just a whole bunch of robotic infantry Some of whom
Yeah.
charge at me, some of whom shoot at me, some of whom do both on occasion. And when you compare it to something like Doom, any versions of Doom, even the ones we didn't like very much, like Dark Ages,
Yeah.
it's very rote. Here is a room full of robots, kill them all. But the gameplay is just really well done. The fundamental metrics of the gunplay are great. And some of the upgrades are cool. And as I say, the mission structures start to open up a little bit more after that initial section. I'm certainly not there for the plot. They cast as the actor for the main character this guy who sounds like he wants to be in a Doom game, but the writing doesn't match. And so he's got this deep, gravelly, F-off kind of voice, but the writing is not about that. That's not really what the thin story is calibrated to, so that seems confused. Basically, I wish they'd taken this engine and done a little bit more with it, frankly. I don't know that the roguelite structure is doing it any favors. I would have preferred, I think, a tightly focused series of combat encounters as opposed to an endless series of rooms with a sometimes boring upgrade structure, but I do keep playing it. It's weird. Like I said, it's just the fundamentals are so sound that all the rest of it is like, well, I would have changed that, I would have changed this other thing, but at the end of the day, it's pretty satisfying. So Deadzone Rogue has been occupying my attention. I'll probably play it a little bit more.
Nice. All right. So I have been playing. All right. Well, okay. So I was capybara spotting, and Mark wanted to see if there was as much of a market for capybara games as there was for cat games, and brought to my attention Capybara with Orange, which is a hidden object game or a hidden capybara game. So I bought it because why not? And it's adorable. You do, in fact, still find cats because each level has like handful of cats. I know. So each level has like, I don't know, a lot, maybe 100 capybaras to find, but then also like 5 cats. I don't know why, but there's still cats, so it's great.
I don't know why, but I am offended on behalf of the capybara. Can't they just have their moment to shine?
No, they cannot. It's pretty cute. There's just 4 levels, and there's really 2 levels that have a daytime and nighttime stage. Daytime is very standard. You just look for the capybaras hidden in the scene, and you click on them, and it's cute. Nighttime, though, is really cool. It impressed me, because when you click on one, they'll light up a little bit, and any kind of lighting from in the scene that's by that capybara will light up. So if they're in a window, then it'll seem like somebody turned a light on inside the building. Or if they're on the street, then sometimes a street lamp will turn on, it'll be illuminating them. And I just thought that was so cool. It looks really pretty. And honestly, have been perfectly happy if every single level was like that. So
I can't help but think that there's a universe where this is used as a ray tracing demo.
But yeah, they're cute. They weren't, sometimes, I don't know, it's just like any hidden object game. Sometimes they're very difficult to find. The fact that every single capybara had an orange helps, because sometimes you could just look for, something that looks like an orange and click on it. And then, I don't know why they all have oranges. Do they even like oranges?
I was about to ask why capybara with orange, but that answers my question. That seems like a lot of oranges.
Yeah, every single one has an orange.
Okay.
But yeah, it's super cute. It's very chill. I enjoyed just getting to, kind of switch off my critical thinking and just find and click on capybaras, oranges, and a handful of kitty cats.
I see that in one of the levels there's the pelican trying to eat the capybara, which is a famous video, which I'm sure you've seen. Yes.
I did enjoy that.
I'm willing to give them a pass for that inclusion of an animal because it is a famous related capybara thing. Yeah. I don't know of any cat and capybara scenes.
Yeah, at first I was like, is this a game dev that has previously done hidden cat games, and that's why they're including a couple cats? But I didn't think that it was.
It's strange because it really looks like the hidden cat games aesthetically.
Yes.
In terms of just the style of the line art that is used as sort of the backdrop for the finding of the capybaras. But yeah, it apparently they've only done this hidden capybaras with orange thing and with some spin-off levels for it. I do not see any cat-devoted games.
Yeah, it's odd. So I don't know if they're doing that to try to capture the hidden cat game audience. I mean, they certainly don't advertise the fact that there's also cats. So I don't know. I thought that was a funny touch, and I have no idea why they did it.
I mean, you're not going to alienate people by including cats. I have to
No,
imagine that there never in the history of
unless it's
ever
Mark. Yeah.
has some. No, I don't have any. How dare you? This is no. You're
Hey,
going to get me in trouble. I mean this.
only because you were offended that the Capybaras didn't get their own game to.
That is nothing against cats.
Of course,
I was
yeah.
just conceptually
I did not mean
affronted
to include that or
that now
imply
that
that.
you
Yeah.
that the capybara cannot have their own exclusive property. They don't have
Yes.
their own platform. Even that has to be co-opted by cats because cats are acquisitive, selfish jerks. And I say this with love, as someone who admires their acquisitiveness and their selfishness, frankly.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna. My first reaction would probably, oh, cute, it's a cat. Wait, what? What's the cat doing here? But
Yeah.
I suppose that's a question that answers itself.
Yeah. You were not anti-cat in itself. You have seen my cats, and you haven't done anything untoward. So
No, I am pro-cat. I'm also
Yeah.
exceptionally allergic to cats.
yeah, and they
and
know.
I'm not like, and I'm certainly not in the position where I look at this capybara game and be like, oh, they decided to include another animal, but why a cat? It's like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
on, like, it's something that's on the internet. Of course it's gonna have cats in it. Soon it's gonna be like soy and that DuPont chemical. It's gonna be in everything, whether we want it to be or not.
Microplastics.
Precisely. Cats are the microplastics of the internet, yeah.
You're right. Okay, so that was Hidden Capybaras with Orange. And now we can move on to our gaming opinion on old school funware segment, where we talk about WarioWare Twisted. Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about WarioWare Twisted?
So WarioWare Twisted is the second WarioWare game. It was on the Game Boy Advance, and it came with a gyro and rumble attachment on the cartridge. Conveniently enough, it was designed in such a way that the cartridge could either be upside down or right side up, thereby allowing it to be in either the classic Game Boy Advance or in the Game Boy Advance SP, or indeed pretty much any configuration of the Game Boy Advance that they put out, like the Micro. The only exception is apparently it doesn't work with the attachment that lets you play Game Boy Advance games on your GameCube, which is a truly strange hardware configuration that I'm sure was enjoyed by someone at some time, somewhere, for some brief period of time. But anyway,
Okay.
it was designed like the first one was by Nintendo Planning Development Division. Okay. Published in 2004 in Japan and 2005 in North America, and very much like the previous one, Mega Micro Games consists of dozens and dozens and dozens of, and I say this with so much sincere affection, stupid non-games. They
Yep.
are these tiny 3 or 4 second long things where you might need to do a single button press or a couple of direction things, or maybe for the very, very complicated ones, maybe both. But in the case of WarioWare Twisted, it's all about, well, most of them, there are some exceptions, it's mostly about rotating your Game Boy Advance.
Yes.
And there are a variety of packages of minigames that are presented to you one after another. If you fail one, you lose a life. You typically have 4 lives, and your goal is to, later on, just rack up your score and get as far as you can. But when progressing through the, and I'm using this term loosely, story mode, you're typically expected to do about a dozen or so, maybe as many as 20, and then there's some sort of weird boss encounter. Now, I say weird. Everything about WarioWare games is incredibly bizarre.
Yes.
They are nonsensical, absurdist bits of weirdness that maybe make a little bit more sense if you're from Japan, but even then I suspect a lot of them are pretty shrug or skepticism-inducing as well. I would be curious to hear about your favorites, Caitlin. Do you have any favorite standouts in either Twisted or any other WarioWare game that might be able to sell this vibe?
So the one that stood out the most to me, I believe, was a boss encounter, and it was a nose-picking game where you have to tilt the Game Boy in order to cause your hand, which is like basically kind of like doing a peace sign. So you have like 2 fingers poking out, and you need to poke them in the nostrils of the boss in order to deal damage. And it's so delightfully weird, and I can't.
Nose picking is a recurring theme
Yes.
in the WarioWare games, and there's typically at least 1 or 2 games themed around that in every offering. I've got two favorites that I think sell the vibe. One of them is simply, now of course the instructions that you get at the outset of these games tend to be a single word with an exclamation point.
Yes.
And so I will just call them by those titles. One of them is feed, where there's a green-headed, none of this makes any sense, green-headed robot thing. We think it's a robot because it's got these two little bolts at the top with clothespins attached to its lower lip.
Yes.
And as you tilt the Game Boy, you're pulling on those clothespins, causing the lower lip to distend out to absurd distances, which allows this lower lip to scoop up bits of food that fall from the top of the screen.
Yes.
We are given no context. I'm not sure there's any context that would make that make any sense. No. Another one is called earmuffs! Exclamation point, where you're presented with a cartoon woman with earmuffs that are at some incorrect angle on her head, and you rotate the Game Boy such that her head basically slides in the middle of these earmuffs until the earmuffs are correctly around her ears. Unlike Feed, where at least what you as a player were doing made some vague conceptual sense, well, you were pulling on the clothespins at the bottom of the green robot thing's face. In earmuffs, as in many of the games in WarioWare, who the player is, what their agency is, too much detail. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah, I love the WarioWare games. Like, I mean, every single one by itself would absolutely not be a game at all. It would be, you'd be like, yeah, why am I doing this? But they are just thrown at you really fast. There's a huge variety of them that you get to experience all at once. And they're so unhinged, and there's nothing else like them as far as I'm aware. It feels like if Vine or TikTok was a video game, this is kind of what it would be like.
I agree with you. I completely adore the WarioWare games. Sitting down and thinking about it, I came to a realization, which is I think that WarioWare may be my favorite Nintendo property. Now, granted,
Really?
I'm not a huge Zelda guy. I'm not a huge Metroid guy. I like all the Metroids that I play, but Zelda tends to bore me. The Mario platforming game, of course. I mean, I love Mario 3 and Super Mario World. Those are brilliant. But the later Marios, they're okay. Like, we enjoyed Wonder, but it didn't really leave a lasting impression. But the WarioWare games, man, I absolutely adore them. I replay them every couple years, and I don't know of a single person that is unmoved by the Wario. Like, is there a human being on Earth who can and who enjoys video games like, the WarioWare game's boring? Like, who is this person? Like, the person who doesn't want, I think that in some ways it's the apotheosis of your own preference set. Like, it's not going to have a 20-minute long tutorial.
Yes.
Like, most of the challenge in the WarioWare games is trying to figure out in the 3 seconds you're allotted, what on earth what are we doing? And it's one of the reasons why the structure of the game, insofar as it has one, is building on these lattice works. Like, you try the random selection of games, but the next time you experience the same package, they've been remixed in with other packages, or they're faster, or they need to do other things. So they expect you to have it under your belt now. They're still tossing lots of random stuff at you, but you're like, I think I recognize what to do. And then you react from some kind of weird muscle memory, and you get through. Such is the genius of WarioWare.
Yeah, I mean, it sums it up perfectly. The main quote-unquote story mode is lots of fun because there's just so much variety. And then if you really want to dive into a specific game, whether it's because you don't really understand it very well or you just want to see what it gets like as it gets more and more difficult, you even can choose to go into, I forget exactly what they call it on the menu, but you can go to the almanac or whatever, and it has every single mini game there. I believe it's only ones that you've actually played, but
yes.
At this point in mind, I think I've unlocked everything. Or I haven't unlocked all the souvenirs. That's a whole other thing. But yeah, you can select one and then play a whole bunch of only that level in a row in order to either practice or figure out how it even works. There's a number of games where it'd be like, hey, what one word thing? It's like, okay, it's over and I failed.
Yes. So I actually deleted my save information from my cloud saves of emulated games because I wanted to start from scratch.
Yeah.
And even the file management is joyously absurd. I went to the menu and I said, delete my progress. And they said, are you sure? And I did. And then they said, deleting. It's like a piece of yourself is gone and has died forever. Take a moment to mourn. And when you're ready to start over, hit start. I'm like, okay, WarioWare, you do that. I'm curious, though, with respect to the WarioWare games, how you think Twisted stacks up.
So I was trying to remember. I don't remember if I ever played the original WarioWare. I own
What?
Twisted, and I know I'm not entirely sure. But I played Twisted and I played Smooth Moves, so I definitely played the ones with the gimmicks.
The Wiimote? Yeah.
Yes.
You gotta play the original, man. It's so good. Because that's actually my only serious criticism of WarioWare Twisted, is that I don't think it's as good as Mega Micro Games because it's all about this physical gimmick. And it's fine. Like, given the simplicity of the games, it's okay. I'm not going to say, like, so many other gimmick-based games, they narrow the gameplay scope to really lean into the gimmick, and that's why when you complain about gameplay being gimmicky, you often tend to mean that it's shallow and with narrow horizons. In the context of WarioWare Twisted, who cares? All the games are shallow. They all have narrow horizons. That's fine. There's 200 of them, and you don't have time to process what's going on before you're on to the next thing. That's part of the joy. It's like TikTok before TikTok was cool. It was just a whole, just inundate you with stuff. Not that I necessarily want to endorse TikTok, per se. But I frequently find that on top of, okay, what am I doing? Okay, do I recognize this game? Every time I have to do like a tentative exploratory tilt because this is going to sound overblown, but I think you'll understand what I mean. The physics logic of each individual game I find inscrutable and inconsistent. What are you tilting?
Yeah.
What is rotating when you're doing it? What direction? Even if I know what I want to do in the context of the game, I don't know how that is translated into my input much of the time.
Yeah.
And that is my only major criticism of WarioWare Twisted. It still has all the charm of the WarioWare games, but I think that because it's built around this gimmick most of the time, that I find it pales in comparison to its other sibling.
Yeah, you don't always know what tilting your device is going to do. Is it going to move a character? Is it going to move an object? Is it going to turn something on the screen? How much is it going to turn it? There's one puzzle in particular that I found quite challenging. I think I failed it the first 2 or 3 times because it was turning a faucet. And even spinning, so my device was completely on its side, which I thought should be the maximum amount of twisting. The liquid was running very slowly, and I was not able to make the timer the first couple times because it took a second for me to actually move it. So yeah, it's a little weird. And you can learn all of those things for each little game, and it's fine. I definitely should try the first WarioWare game.
I would like to propose a comparison, and Caitlin, you can let me know if this is fair.
Yeah.
Because something I actually probably should have mentioned in the context of Deadzone Rogue, you can do co-op. You can do online co-op for Deadzone Rogue. This is not a thing that I've ever done. So broadly speaking, when it comes to co-op, I tend to shy away from things like that. In particular, just getting you to play Night Rain with me is like pulling teeth, and it's very, very sad.
Stop.
And makes me feel desperately lonely and unloved. But
no,
I would say that WarioWare is pure joy, pure unadulterated creativity, and tons of design thrown up against a wall, and there's so much good stuff there, even though every individual little detail won't stand up to scrutiny or indeed stand up to human reason for very long. There's just so much impressive joy in the cartridge. And then on the other end of the spectrum, superficially very similar in a lot of ways, we have Mario Party, which is one of the most benighted game series I think I've ever interacted with tedious, unfun, contrived gameplay experiences that go on way too long and seem like a waste of everyone's time, including but not limited to the very talented artists and designers that were involved in making it. This is my hot take.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say that I love Mario Party because I think loving Mario Party I'm not going to say it's impossible, but Mario Party is a game of pure frustration.
Yeah, I agree.
It doesn't matter if you're good at the minigames. It doesn't matter if you happen to roll well. The bonus stars at the end are going to screw over everybody, and some random person is going to be granted the crown. I mean, not necessarily, but like, it's very frustrating to play if you want to win.
I had to silence the board game snob in me to bypass all those criticisms because a lot of those same criticisms apply to your contemporary Mario Kart games. I will play contemporary Mario Kart games because there's fun driving involved. And
Yes.
yeah, whoever wins is mostly going to be arbitrary, sure. Just the process of getting to the end of Mario Party, though, the minigames last too long. Even the individual scenes, even setting aside that they don't matter, that the consequences of victory or failure are irrelevant. They're just overlong, under-designed, unappealing, and don't offer enough variety. It's almost like I could, if you had told me that the Mario Party series were like the 8 and 16-bit design drafts for a form that eventually evolved into WarioWare and a more contemporary game design idiom, I could believe you, even though I know that's not the way that it worked.
I agree with that. Because, like, so many of the Mario Party games might even be interesting if they were shorter. The way that you even get to do them is kind of annoying. Like, because it's all based on what colors you land on the board. There's a bunch of green ones, which apparently can either be blue or red, and it'll do this, like, little die roll to figure out if your colors can be blue or red. 99% of the time, you're just playing a normal, like, everyone versus everyone game. But there's also supposed to be co-op games in there, and 3 people versus 1, where one person gets to be, much more powerful than everybody else. And theoretically, that should be fun, but you don't get to play those very often. Like, I don't know. They can be fun, but they can also be aggressively unfun and too long, and you get screwed over by something dumb, and I don't know.
Anyway, I realize that the comparison is not a totally fair one. It is pretty forced in a number of ways, but just as an assembly of smaller activities leading up to some sort of whole, I think that WarioWare is brilliant and Mario Party is torturous. And every time I go through the list of WarioWare titles, I say this as somebody who does emulation, I am a little sad that so many of them are not easy to emulate. So WarioWare is trivial to emulate. WarioWare Twisted is shockingly easy to emulate because many things have a gyrometer or a gyroscope inside them. Mm-hmm. Like pretty much any modern Android device can run RetroArch and has a gyro in it. So long as you know how it works, and there are endless tutorials, it's a pretty easy setting to modify. WarioWare Touch is pretty easy if you've got a touch screen. Then you start getting into the more complicated stuff, like smooth moves is difficult. Wii emulation is a whole thing. Ugh,
yeah.
Makes me sad. I should really try the 3DS one, though. The 3DS one I could probably emulate without too much difficulty on my Surface Duo. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I love the WarioWare series. You should play the original, Caitlin.
Yeah, I definitely should. I think I may have, but I don't physically have it, so that makes me question it. It's possible that I could have played somebody else's copy, or I played it at someone's house, but unfortunately I never owned a copy of it myself. Was it a Advance game?
Yep, it's a series that started in the Game Boy Advance, and Mega Micro Games was published in 2003, so the year before Twisted.
So yeah, that's WarioWare Twisted. It's delightful, and apparently I really need to pick up Mega Micro Games also and give it either a first try or a second try. All right, and with that, we're going to take a break to pay some bills, and we're back. All right, we're going to be talking about our feature game, Citizen Sleeper. Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about Citizen Sleeper?
Citizen Sleeper was designed by Jump Over the Age in 2022. Jump Over the Age is a one-person studio, specifically Gareth Damian Martin. And the remit of the story of Citizen Sleeper was inspired by the designer's belief that in many speculative fiction games, among them Mass Effect, that they found the side characters more interesting than the main plotline. And so they wanted to make a game that was about living ordinary lives in extraordinary settings. And so they made Citizen Sleeper, which is inspired by their own experiences as a non-binary person struggling through the gig economy. So in Citizen Sleeper, you are an eponymous sleeper. Sleepers are effectively synthetic bodies with copied, digitalized consciousnesses of sleepers who are normal meat sack humans that have been put in some sort of comatose state for a variety of reasons, and now there's this kind of ersatz copy of them with most of their memories gone, yay convenient amnesia, that get to be used as slave labor by some sort of corporation. And it's a good thing that this is purely a dystopian horror story, because it's not as though we have Sam Altman talking about how he is very confident that he will be able to make, fabricate, and exploit digitized slaves sometime during our lifetime. Now, I, for one, at least find it personally very buoying that he doesn't seem to understand what he's talking about, and the prospect of turning a probabilistic machine that is barely functional as a chatbot into something of having consciousness doesn't seem at all plausible, much less likely. But what do I know? I'm just a philosopher. So anyway, in Citizen Sleeper, what you have is it's this. There was this brief period in indie design right around 2022 where dice placement was all the rage. So you roll a whole bunch of dice, just 6-sided dice at the beginning of your day, and you can slot them into various activities where most of the time high numbers are better. More on that later. And they will advance various tracks. Again, very evocative of various board games. Once you fill up some tracks, some things happen. But all the while, you need to keep yourself fed. You need to worry about the fact that your corporation-designed body is deteriorating rapidly. And you get to meet new people, you get to be threatened by a variety of individuals in a variety of contexts, experience all manner of awful things, and chart your own course through Citizen Sleeper, possibly with some kind of ending, maybe.
Yeah. I played Citizen Sleeper for the first time, probably pretty close to when it came out. I was completely obsessed. I got most of the endings with my one character. I'd chosen an engineer that time. I decided to start over this last week. I chose operator this time. The classes are very, they have different starting stats. By the end of the game, your starting class does not matter at all. But
yeah.
Early on it does. Yeah. I always find early game in Citizen Sleeper to be quite frustrating because you never have enough money. Your dice are never the right numbers. It's hard to figure out how to get yourself fed and everything. As you progress through all the different storylines, you get things called drives, which is basically a quest. When you complete a drive, you get a skill point that you can apply to your skill tree. This either involves giving yourself some sort of unique ability. My favorite one is the one that lets you re-roll all of your dice once a day.
Testify.
So good. And other ones are just stat bumps. So by the end of the game, you will have been able to get rid of any downside that your original class had by just getting rid of your -1, negative. And money by the end of the game, very easy. Keeping your body fed and healthy, pretty easy. But early on, all of that is a slog, and it's frustrating, and that's probably okay, in my opinion, because that's, I don't know what else you expect as a sleeper on the run. You arrive at the station half dead, and you have to figure it all out and in order to survive. It feels like survival in the beginning, let's put it that way.
So this is one of those areas where I think game narrative has a bit of a challenge, especially when compared with narrative in other media. I have yet to encounter, either in a video game or in a board game for what it's worth, or even in a tabletop role-playing game, a satisfying way of representing the grind of poverty or ill health or anything like. Stories of that nature are compelling. I'm not saying that nobody wants to hear. I enjoy stories of that nature. But in game format, they tend to just be tedious and involving upkeep.
Yeah.
Rather than communicating some kind of deeper theme, it's just tedium. And so it can be very, very difficult. And I agree with you. The early part is a grind. When Citizen Sleeper first got released, I played it for about an hour and I bounced off of it because I was just engaging in a grind. And much of the time, especially in the early bits where you're more vulnerable, your dice rolls are very consequential. Mm-hmm. Later on, as the story progresses, you have so many more places where you can put your dice, it is less of a thing. But early on, before any rerolls, when you've only got a narrow horizon and your primary concern is just getting the next meal or getting the next injection so that you can keep getting more dice, it's just this constant death spiral. And
Yeah.
I respect the fact that, again, like when I read that, again, this was about, the designer's experience struggling through the fringes of contemporary capitalism. It's like, oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But again, I've yet to see a game successfully convey that as a satisfying narrative rather than an unpleasant grind.
Yeah, the balance of allowing the game itself to still be enjoyable while also conveying this is not something that I think I've seen done completely successfully anywhere.
Early limited rerolls might have been a thing, because eventually you get a perk that lets you reroll all your dice once per day. It's very simple. If you start out the day and you have a 1 through 6, for example, just arbitrarily, you spend the 6, you spend the 5, maybe you spend the 4 if you got a place to put it, reroll the 1, 2, 3, you're not very likely to do worse. So if early on in the game you had like a limited reroll and then the upgrade was to a slightly better reroll, I think that would have been a much better, smoother curve in terms of things, because I agree with you. It feels like at some point during Citizen Sleeper, you turn a corner and suddenly money is no object. You have no problem keeping fed. You have no problem keeping yourself in good working order. And at that point, you get to, explore the plot lines you want to explore.
Yes.
It's the transition itself is kind of jarring.
Yeah, it doesn't feel smooth. Like you said, you turn a corner and all of a sudden everything is easier. And before that, it was like, oh, well, I can't afford my stabilizer right now, but I only have 2 dice, and it's only going to get worse from here. Only having 2 dice for an entire day's worth of things, there's very little that you can do, especially if you don't roll them well.
Yeah. And this leads into the overall, I guess, game mechanisms of Citizen Sleeper. This, I think, is the first example of a RPG-ish game that falls under the category of games that I've been calling just enough games. Games where I want to tell a story. What game mechanisms can I put in here? We're talking Hellblade. We're talking anything with slightly more gameplay than Still Weeks the Deep, slightly more gameplay than just a straightforward visual novel or walking simulator. And the way that Citizen Sleeper does it is with stats and dice. And as I say, to my mind, it's just enough. It's mostly perfunctory. At a certain point, it ceases to matter a whole heck of a lot. Like, when you start the game, they talk about how you start with a class, which, as we both agreed, is pretty irrelevant. And it's not even really a class. It's just you start with a +1 and a -1.
Yeah.
The art's cool. That's something. But playing through the game as an engineer versus an operator doesn't really make any difference.
Yeah.
It's just that every once in a while, either because you're down to 2 dice or something, or you roll really badly. I mean, at the end of the day, you need the dice you need. You need certain rolls. Certain rolls are going to be useful for you to advance the storylines that you want to advance. If I felt that this was just a way to force me to spend a little bit of attention to other plot lines and not just burn through a single plot line, that'd be one thing. But if the dice won't let me advance the plot line I want, they're probably not going to let me advance the plot lines I don't want either. And so I'm mostly just scanning around the system being like, okay, what's the worst that could happen if I slot my 1 into here? Oh, all right, let's do it.
Yeah, so I did like that Citizen Sleeper kind of gives you a little bit of a hint as to what is safe, and I use safe specifically for a reason, to use your crappy dice with, because you have safe actions, risky actions, and dangerous actions. Dangerous, if you roll bad, is usually like you are going to take damage to your body, so your condition is going to go down, which means you need your special sleeper medicine even sooner, and you're going to have fewer dice. Energy means that you need to eat again soon. You use 2 energy bars every day, and I think there's a maximum of 5, but you could take a hit to 2 by doing something wrong, rolling wrong if you're in danger. Risky, I think, has the same sort of consequence, at least with energy. I'm not sure that you can take a condition damage from a risky thing. And if you can, it's probably only 1 bar. Safe, you might lose a little bit of money, or you might just make a lot less progress on whatever you're trying to do. Like maybe if you have a positive outcome, you'll get a +3, neutral might be 2, and if you fail, you might only get a +1, but you're still able to at least progress. So I think that's one of the things that helps make it so early game, even when you have crappy dice, you can still have some semblance of progress. But it still sucks, and if you don't have a good safe option to put that die in, it's a whole thing. There's very, very few actions in the game where you want a 1 or a 2.
And by the same token, it's randomness upon randomness. That 4
Yes.
or 5 could end up in failure anyway. The dice, it's weird. The random dice are your ticket to enter the lottery. And it just means that the higher numbers give you a better chance of success. I mean, it's fine. Like I say, it's just enough. It does the job. I don't find it particularly interesting or engaging. And as I said, I wish that there had been some way to mitigate bad luck in the early bits and maybe a little bit weaker way to mitigate it later on. But there's that. So back to the story.
Yes.
So the vibe is very much in the well-worn idiom of corporate dystopian cyberpunk kind of deal.
Yeah.
And there was a period where I was finding the unrelenting bleakness a little bit one note. It's well written, and again, I'm not disputing the legitimacy of these experiences, and I'm not even disputing the satisfying nature of stories that are unrelentingly bleak.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized after the fact that it wasn't so much the tone of the storytelling that I was reacting to. It was the tone of the storytelling coupled with the grind of keeping myself fed as a digital version in the Citizen Sleeper. The moment that kind of faded into the background, where I felt like I had more agency in the gameplay end, the unrelentingly bleak story I found less burdensome on a psychic level. And then I was able to appreciate the writing and the storytelling much, 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 much more than I was during the early game. In part because then it's more about the people rather than just getting your basic needs satisfied.
Yeah.
Which, I'm sorry, getting your basic needs satisfied is incredibly important and endlessly satisfying, but narratively can be a little thin.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that, especially early game when you sometimes have to make a choice between feeding yourself and progressing a quest that is about to run the clock out. You have to decide, like, all right, am I going to take a hit to my energy and my condition in order to progress this part of the story that I thought was interesting? Or am I going to have to be selfish today? And I get that that can be a somewhat realistic glance into what it might look like if you were this character. But as a person who is trying to play a video game for fun, sometimes that sucks.
And it doesn't have to be that way, right? I remember in particular something that happens in The Walking Dead Chapter 1, where you don't have enough food, and through a whole bunch of weird accidents, you end up as the only power broker that everyone's willing to trust, and you have to decide who gets to go hungry. And that was satisfying storytelling. It was about people, it was about who you wanted to alienate, it was about power, and it was about scarcity. And it didn't feel like a grind. Whereas, again, the way that the story is implemented through gameplay in Citizen Sleeper, especially during the early bits, is a little bit too much of a grind. So, having complained a lot about the early bits...
Yes, yeah.
And also having flagged that in the later bits, the numbers kind of fade into the background. But that's better, because Citizen Sleeper is not at its best when it's leaning on its very threadbare mechanisms. We have a very, very well-written corporate dystopian future nightmare, but what that does is that it allows some of these moments of connection, some of these moments of hope, some of these moments of self-discovery to land all the more successfully in my experience. I was not expecting, especially based on the experience of like hours 1 and 2 of Citizen Sleeper, to get socked right in the feels. And, I mean, I'm a man. I don't cry at anything except baseball. So anybody who says that I was crying during the ending of Citizen Sleeper is a liar.
Yeah.
And I will engage in fisticuffs with them to establish my manhood. But I'm saying that a lesser person might think about, well, excuse me, might consider what happened. You're going to have to take over here, Caitlin. I'm thinking about baseball.
I thought that the way that all of the character arcs, like of all of the people that you meet over the course of Citizen Sleeper, the way they wrap up in a way where you can either choose to leave the station with that person, or you can choose to stay behind. And either way, I think a lot of the stories work really well. They can be very emotional. I in fact am... the first time I played, the DLC was not out. and now the DLC is out. So I have not yet completed that story, but I love all the different paths that you get. You can kind of choose like what you want for your sleeper, like how you want them to affect this station, the eye that they're on, the people that are around them. I love a good character story, and I feel like it really leans into that in the latter half, especially.
Yeah, and in the latter half, there are so many threads you can pull on, you really feel like you're pulling on the ones that you want to.
Yes.
And the way that my playthrough went, I didn't know that all the DLC was free. So I actually found that to be a helpful way to further narrow the scope because, frankly, the interface isn't great. Navigating from point to point is tedious.
Yes.
I think they could have done a lot better job of making it easy to pick what you're going to do for the day.
Crossing the rim is so annoying when you have to do it multiple times.
Going up and down the elevator to the center of the eye. Oof.
Hate it.
Yeah. So I would be very curious about your experiences with the DLC. Here's my problem. So I got the ending that I wanted to get. And in the process, because a variety of things become time limited, I wasn't in a position that I am in lots of other RPGs where it's like, okay, I've done the 5 characters I really care about. Let's wrap up the 5 characters I care about less before I go kill the final boss. The way it worked in Citizen Sleeper was, okay, you focused on the people you focused on, time's ticking down, make your call, right? And so some stories are just going to be unexplored. And in a very organic kind of, that's just not what I was doing with my time kind of way. It's not even that I found them uninteresting, it's that I found the other ones more interesting. And I don't know that I want to disturb my vision of how things went down. I have a great deal of emotional attachment to the specifics of what went down and how.
Yeah.
And as curious as I am about the DLC bits, about how other storylines resolve, right now, because I only finished a couple days ago, I've been sitting with the ending for a little bit. I'm certainly not ready now to disturb the ending that I have. It kind of feels like bringing the sleeper back would kind of like be repeating the trauma that was done to them in a strange way, you know, because they were born against their will. Granted, we all are, right? But as a corporate slave that was born of someone else's decision to copy their consciousness. And I got them to a place, figuratively, narratively. And so bringing them back feels like a further trauma. I know they're not real. I respect that. Don't worry, I'm not suffering from schizophrenia, and I'm not been talking to the sleeper. I know they're not here right now. I get that.
Okay.
I just don't feel like undoing the end state. And I feel like going back and exploring other things and poking at the DLC might have that effect. I'd be far more interested in trying Citizen Sleeper 2, frankly.
Yeah, so I think, in a way, I'm lucky that I got an ending first that I didn't like that much. But I was just like, oh, okay, I don't know. What would happen if I did this? And I got that ending, and I was like, okay. I load up my save, and I chose the other thing. Generally, in Citizen Sleeper, you have 2 choices. One of them allows you to leave. Sometimes that's a figurative leaving. Sometimes it's literal. And the other one allows you to stay. If you choose to stay, you can usually just keep playing Citizen Sleeper. So I decided to just keep playing. And then at that point, it's like, well, I've seen one ending. Might as well start collecting. I can easily see why, if you get what feels like the perfect ending for your sleeper, why you might not want to revisit it. I mean, what could you possibly, if you already got what you feel was a good end, what could the other endings do for you?
And make no mistake, Caitlin knows this very well, the listeners might not necessarily. When I say it's my perfect ending, I don't mean that it's the one where everyone skips happily off into the sunset. Like, those endings I often find trite and unsatisfying, and frankly, especially in a game like Citizen Sleeper, if you had an ending where everyone ends happily ever after, I don't think that would make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
But the ending that I had was tonally perfect, and it was a legitimate manifestation and culmination of the priorities that I had exercised over the course of the story. And I found it deeply affecting, and frankly, I'm happy where it left up, and I am happy with how all the secondary characters ended up in my recollection, and so that's where I'm sitting.
That is perfectly fair. Yeah, I've received one ending so far with my second playthrough, and I'm I'm in part 3 of the DLC. The DLC is significantly longer than I had realized. As another note, which I really liked, was Citizen Sleeper gives you ample warning that when you start the DLC, there might be a clock that starts, and you need to, if you're going to do the DLC, you better be ready to focus on this thing. You can't be having 87 other priorities. So I really appreciate the heads up that they give you. And they do that in a handful of other spots in Citizen Sleeper, which I think is also really good. I appreciate that so much when games give you a heads up, either about a point of no return or a timer that is about to start ticking, because it's just really helpful from a I'm playing the game to have fun, not to be stressed out point of view.
I agree 100%. It's interesting to hear that the DLC is so long, though, because that's another thing I really appreciated about Citizen Sleeper. I thought that the length was just about perfect. Maybe I would have shaved off a half hour of the beginning bits, which we both agree were not at its best.
Yeah.
But, we're talking about 6-ish to 8-ish hours, and there's a lot of good story there, and a lot of different things to do, and places to go, and people to see. And it was a really good use of time, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so far, the DLC is interesting. The only thing that I haven't liked is I did think that I was going... Before I started doing the DLC, I thought that I was going to have the game, my second playthrough, be completely finished by the time we had this discussion. And it is not.
Sure.
That's okay. I wouldn't say it's, like, hugely long, but yeah, there's multiple parts to it, 3 parts. And each one will take a number of in-game days to get through.
Well, I'm always in favor of additional free content. I think that there is plenty in the original game, and good for the designer for just throwing more good stuff at the users.
Yep, I love it. I'm very excited to try out Citizen Sleeper 2 now. I had started it, and I think I started it at a bad time because there was a bunch of other priorities that I had, but especially after replaying Citizen Sleeper, I'm pretty excited about Citizen Sleeper 2 to see how they change it up from the first one.
So you're saying that at the beginning of the morning, you didn't want to use your 5 and your 6 on Citizen Sleeper 2. You had to devote it to other things like...
Yes, indeed.
Like dogs and finding Capybara.
Yep, that is true. I guess with that, we can move on to some shameless hyping of upcoming titles. Mark, what would you like to shamelessly hype today?
Drift Survivor 2. So, the original Drift Survivor is a $2 arcade-style drifty game, which is not really about car racing. You're basically in this arena, and you're actually shooting at targets and collecting time extensions while you kind of drift around in this weird sort of environment. And it's all just boxes and low-poly cars and things. And I'm actually a pretty big fan of Drift Survivor because it runs on Portmaster. I've talked about Portmaster before. So on your cheap little $50 retro emulation handheld, and if you've listened to our bonus episode, you've heard me talk about the Ambernic XX series of devices, you can run that on your cheap little emulation handheld. And I played a lot of Drift Survivor on a variety of different handheld devices. But Drift Survivor 2... which is supposed to be coming out sometime later this year, appears to be a more traditionally structured game in that you're going to have, like, racetracks and other cars and things of that nature. It says it's going to have a roguelite structure, which, whatever, most games do nowadays, I guess. Yeah. And I thought that the core engine was kind of cute, and it was just fun to run around in little arenas, and the driving action is just clumsy enough. You can't have a game call itself Drift Survivor and have your car be able to turn around on a dime. It just wouldn't work. But by the same token, if there's too much drifting, it can feel clumsy. So it was just very arcadey and satisfying and quick. So I'm curious what they're going to do with Drift Survivor 2. It appears to be really trying to flesh out this notion and seeing how far it can go. And I, for one, am curious.
So I take it Drift Survivor 1 is not a roguelite?
No, it's not. It's very arcadey. You just start it up. You have a time limit. And whenever you collide with something, your time limit goes down by a couple of seconds, as well as just running out the clock. And so you're constantly on the move from time pickup to time pickup. And you automatically fire. For some reason, your car is equipped with weapons. Like, the setting doesn't make any sense. They don't even try to explain it. And there are enemies sometimes that spawn, and you shoot at them automatically if you're close enough to them. But mostly you're just frantically racing around from time pickup to time pickup.
Okay, what are the enemies in Drift Survivor 1?
Polygons.
Okay.
Boxes and little rhomboids.
Got it. Yeah, Drift Survivor 2 looks cute. I had never played Drift Survivor 1, but just watching this car with a huge gun on top of it drift around and shoot at trucks and tanks, and it looks delightfully bizarre. I am excited for the Coral Island multiplayer. That patch literally just came out, as far as I'm aware, just a few days ago. I've owned Coral Island for a while and still haven't gotten around to playing it, but now I think I might be able to bully a fellow cozy gamer friend to play it with me, so I'm very excited about that.
That sounds so cruel. Bullying a cozy gamer, that sounds like the most violent thing you could do.
It's friendly bullying. It's don't you want to play this cozy game with me, please?
Yo, nerd. We're gonna go harvest some produce and make some mayonnaise, or I'm gonna give you a swirly.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Okay.
the way it's gonna be.
But you haven't played Coral Island yet.
No.
Okay.
I bought it around the time that Coral Island got its 1.0 release, because I was like, oh yay, it's out of early access. I can finally play it. And then there were some co-op cozy games that I opted to play instead. Okay, so sorry, this is sad. This is like the opposite of a shout, but I talked about Luma Island a bunch, a number of episodes ago, and I recently learned that I guess last year they got, the studio was bought, I think in May of this year. Virtually everybody was laid off, and they are turning off the online capabilities next month in September.
Oh, really? That's terrible. A lot of people like Luma Island.
Yeah, and I mean, it was really fun to play with people. It was not the best, cozy farm game I've ever played, but it was really fun to play with a friend. And now, pretty soon you won't be able to play with a friend. So I think that sucks.
It only launched late last year. This isn't something that's been out for 5 years or so.
Yeah. So it's really, I think that's just so sad. It's a really bad, another one of those things, the state of the games industry.
It's like a corporate dystopia.
It is a little bit like that, huh?
I think the cruel punchline to this is that the developer and original publisher is called Feel Free Games.
Yeah. They know,
Ouch.
Well, yeah, sad. So, on that note, that's the end of our episode. Thank you so much for listening. And if you'd like to support All My Best Friends Are Digital, you can check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/amphad. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to get in touch, you can reach us at allmybestfriendsaredigital@gmail.com. Hope to see you again soon.